Welcome to episode 1 of Shame Free Gaming. Yes, I finally have a name for this podcast now. Today we are joined by Lockhart, a game developer who has made visual novels like Avalon, Penny for Your Thoughts, and is currently working on Over the Moon.
It's the sequel to A Moment of Bliss, and that is the sequel to A Petal Among Thorns.
Mm-hmm.
Very poetic names. Thank you for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be here. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy for you to be here as well. So today,
Thank you.
so today we're going to cover some news and then cover a few games, and we're also going to talk about why incest games are so popular. Now, this is a very controversial topic, and Patreon has very specific rules about the subject, but we'll get into that later. So, on to the news.
So the big piece of news we have for today is that Gumroad is no longer going to have adult content, and this is a still developing story because I guess Visa and Mastercard reached out to them, and they've panicked and they've had multiple statements released in the past week as they're trying to figure out how to not, how to still take credit cards.
Mm-hmm.
Lockhart, you've got some experience with Gumroad. You want to tell us what it is?
As far as I know, it is like a service provider, so you can contact an individual for work that you want done. Like I hired a voice actress through Gumroad, and I also reached out to them to see if they would be willing to host my work. And they said that they would, as long as it complies with their policies. However, that was before the policy change.
So they're like, yeah, about that.
And this was all pretty recent. Like, I think it was like March 15th
Yeah.
that this happened. And they're still adding like bullet points, which is honestly annoying.
But then Patreon's still adding bullet points.
Yeah, they're still like updating their
It's
policy.
like, in our continuing path to allowing no adult content ever again, we are adding these new categories.
Yeah,
So,
tightening the belt, slow strangulation.
so this is a service that kind of like Fiverr, it looks like. So,
Mhm.
and I guess putting voice actresses and animators and all of these other skill positions out of reach. I guess it's going to be harder and harder for you to find talent to hire for your games. Speaking of the games we have, what's the first game you got up for us, Annie?
Well, I wanted to talk about, I guess we'll start off strong with dating my daughter.
Oh God.
That's as strong as it gets. Yep.
I mean, it really is.
So now this was one of the early games on Patreon,
Yeah.
and it was one of the early victims of the Patreon policy change, correct?
Yeah, the crackdown in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it was still being made, but it was going to take longer to finish. So then they started making Melody,
Mm-hmm.
and that started around 2018.
Mm-hmm. And didn't they just complete a third game?
Yeah, Sunshine Love,
Okay.
which is kind of like Chasing Sunsets, if you've ever played that.
Okay. That's a game on Steam, right?
Yeah.
It's very popular.
Or,
And-
well, Chasing Sunsets came first.
Oh,
So
so
Sunshine Love is
they-
like Chasing
they
Sunsets.
were all in development hell from like
They-
forever.
Yeah, they really were.
Why does it take so long to make a game, Lockhart?
It can take hours to make one render. So you have to keep in mind that it's really the artwork that takes the longest amount of time.
Hmm.
So what?
And you're not just talking about posing models. I mean, you have to put these models together. You have to put together scenery, and the lighting can take an extremely long time to get right because you can't immediately see it. You have to wait for the picture to generate a preview, and that takes 30 seconds or more depending on your hardware. So yeah, it really is the artwork that takes 80% of my time.
Yeah, that makes sense. How long do
Mhm.
animations take?
Not as long as you think. So the way that I do that is I make the first frame and then I make the last frame. And what usually happens is it has a nice transition between the frames. It'll add, 60 frames between them. And then you make micro adjustments. So it does take longer and there is after work that you have to do. You have to put it together,
Hmm.
but not as long as you would think. So not too bad.
Yeah, that's not bad. I thought it would take longer.
It depends on what kind of animation you're making, though. I mean, mine are like
That's true.
1 second clips. If
Yeah.
you're doing a 30-second animation, I cannot fathom how you even do that because Daz does not do that.
Really?
Yeah, it's not like Maya. Maya is what a lot of animators use, or Blender,
Oh, yeah.
but it has features for that, and Daz really doesn't. It is a posing tool. If you're wondering why you see real janky animations in Daz games, that's why. It's really not made for animations.
I think that's why so many developers still use like the Honey Select stuff because there is so much software
Hmm.
to make
Not just
smoother
that.
animations.
You have to remember they have animations already in Honey Select, so you don't even have to make an animation yourself. You just plug it in.
Oh, that's why they're all like the
Yeah, it's
same.
real nice.
It's like
Yeah, exactly.
it's like let's not worry about the licensing of this game. We got pretty animations.
I've
Let's do it.
I've seen this animation before.
So with dating my daughter, this was
Mhm.
at its time, it was one of the top Patreon games,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the top Patreons, up there with Summertime Saga, which I'm sure is on your list to talk
Yeah,
about as
yeah. I'll
well.
talk about that next.
Since we're delving into this cohabitation flavor with all of these games, and I understand that some of these games were modified to be compliant with Patreon's changing policies.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to talk about the modifications, or is
Yeah,
that
yeah. Well, we can talk.
verboten? Or
Well, we can talk about that with Summertime Saga.
okay, so tell me about dating my daughter. This is a popular game. It's a
Yeah,
completed game.
yeah. It's completed. It completed a while ago. It's so where you it's whoa. It's a game where you slowly romance your daughter, and along the way you can choose to share her with someone, or have a polyamorous relationship, or just have a monogamous relationship. And I do think it introduced a lot of gaming mechanics that we see today with incest games.
Such as?
Well, like you can choose to share her with somebody.
Oh, okay. So you mean from the flavor selection?
Yeah.
Is it a corruption game?
Uh, I, yeah, a little bit. I mean, she's already kind of. No, I would say yes. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a corruption game.
It's
I mean, it depends on how you define the term.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was like, it's kind of like it. It's just it's not like hardcore corruption.
Is it because corruption's such a huge umbrella that
Yeah.
you're having difficulty?
If you took out the titles, would it still be a corruption game? If you took out the names of the relationship?
That's an interesting question. So is it is let's look at it from this way. Is the main character on a sexual journey of discovery and exploration, or is this main female character the deuteragonist on the arc of sexual exploration and discovery?
I would say the main character is also
Okay.
on a journey of sexual discovery.
And that's
I'd say awakening.
That's an
Yeah.
interesting question on if you take the context out, because isn't the whole theme here completely contextual?
It's romantic if you look at it without the relationship titles. It is a romance.
Mhm.
He's not like making her do anything she doesn't want to do or convincing her to do things that she would otherwise not.
I don't know what it was. It was like affection and love. Like you can affect that by the choices that you make. And so like if you do something that she doesn't want to do, then the points will go down. There's 2 points. I don't remember what they were, but
It tries to discourage you from corrupting her.
yeah. And you choose the things that she wants to do. Like for example, like this one guy wants to take a photo of her, and so you have the option of saying yes or no, but then you also have the option of saying like ask the daughter what she wants to do.
Giving her agency.
Yeah.
You don't see that a lot.
All right. So, is it a good game? Would you recommend this? Is it dated? I mean, what's your take
I mean,
on it?
well, yeah, it's obviously dated, but honestly, it's not bad. Like if you like the incest flavor, I think it's explores
Well-
that flavor really well.
The writing is pretty rough, I would say. It really is the
You like
flavor
it?
that drives the story.
Yeah. So in that kind of sense, yeah, it is kind of rudimentary kind of writing.
Are we pretending that the writing is what people are primarily selecting by?
There's a reason it has bad writing and was still really popular.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I mean, where does writing fall on your hierarchy of
Oh,
what
it's,
people select for?
I don't know,
Near
maybe
the
like
end?
yeah. So the animations are kind of rough too. There are animations, which I was honestly surprised about.
Given
But
how old it is.
yeah, but they're really rough.
Okay.
They're better than a lot, even some recent games. I mean, you got to remember, Daz again has really rough animations, but
Hmm.
if you look at, I think it was Midnight Paradise, it does everything right except the animations, and they're jankier than Dating My Daughter.
Mm.
And what is our next game, Manny?
It's Summertime Saga.
Oh, God, the monolith.
Yeah.
The number 4 top
Big
Patreons.
Oh God.
It's the
Yeah.
number 1 game, but I think it's number 4. I think there was a time where it was number 1, the number 1 Patreon.
Yes. I wouldn't doubt it.
So, and Summertime Saga is a game that is so old. It was originally an incest game, but
Because of the Patreon crackdown in
there were
2017.
modifications. So, walk us through what happened with the game.
Well, so like you said, it was an incest game. So you had, the main character, you, the son, and your dad dies, of course. And then you have the mom and the sister. And that was basically the incest part. And so there's other characters, of course, but that's the incest part. And so with the crackdown in 2017, it transformed from a high school incest game. I forgot to say it took place at a high school, and it transformed into a college experience with your guardians. So I think that's pretty much what it is now.
So you're keeping the close proximity. You're keeping certain themes, even if the context is changing.
Yeah.
Are people okay with this? Are they tolerant of it? Do they still get what's happening? I mean, how does this affect reception and consumption?
Are you asking what the relationship aspect has?
Well, if this is
a negative or a positive effect?
If this is an incredibly popular flavor, arguably one of the most popular flavors, Patreon says you can't do this flavor anymore. People are trying to work within those guidelines. Are people still consuming it as much, or do they consume it less because it does have this degree of modification and censorship?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I mean, it's just interesting to see. I mean, we're always going to have some degree of censorship. We're always going to have some degree of regulation, and how we humans react to that and consume can change depending on the context. And I was just curious to see, are these games less popular, or are these games more popular? I mean, do we look at the metrics? Is this just one big shell game that everybody's kind of playing and pretending they're not playing? So
I assume the reason you would think that it might grow in popularity is because taboo can be very enticing. And if it's more taboo, it would be more enticing.
Well, I also think it's, easy to put it in games. So, it's easy to put a guy and a girl and then call them siblings.
Yeah.
So
you're not making more renders. You're not doing anything else.
Yeah. And if it's that easy and gains a lot of players, then of course developers are going to continue to put it in games to make money.
If you put it in the same house, you don't have to render as many backgrounds.
Exactly.
It's lazy.
Yeah, well.
Jeez.
I know you've done multiple Summertime Saga videos. That is a game that you recommend for players.
Yeah, definitely. It has a lot going on. So it's not just an incest game. You can get with like so many characters. So, and the aunt. I totally forgot about the aunt.
Well, we're going to talk about is an aunt incest. Depends on your country.
Yeah, it depends on your country.
But we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
And Lockhart's like, yes, it is. What the hell is wrong with you? Listen, man, I don't make the laws across the world. And Annie's like, I don't yet.
I don't want to be in charge of that.
Like, I can't be in charge.
She's going to be a tyrant.
Oh, God, I can't imagine myself as a tyrant.
Oh, man, and she tries to, like, please everybody and, like, be nice. It's like,
and be like, let's just be happy.
Like,
don't kill each other.
Whose head should we
She's
chop
going to
off
feed
today?
everybody happy pills.
Oh, man.
Yeah, just make everybody into, like, zombies.
There we go, Alex.
Put it in the water.
All right, what next game do we have?
Well, we can talk about Milfy City.
Oh, didn't you, like, totally assassinate that game?
Yeah, I
in your
did trash
review?
on that game a lot. But it is a really popular incest game, so you know.
It ticks a lot of boxes. I mean, it's open world. You can explore, you can move around, which is something that's very hard to program and code, and so it adds a lot of spice. Just that,
That's
the
true.
illusion of control.
the illusion of control.
Well, 'cause, I can go somewhere. I can do this
You
thing.
know, I think, yeah, and there's a reward aspect to that too. You know, you're trying to solve the puzzle, right? You're trying to get into the girl's pants. And if it's hard to do that or it takes work, then there is that reward sensation at the end. And I think that's why sandbox games can be very popular if they're done well.
Well, I
Hmm.
think the most popular games are all sandbox games, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah. Is being a dick a
Even dating my
sandbox?
daughter had some.
It has some.
It
They're
does.
the free roam sections.
Yeah, the free roam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And being a dick has actual homework in it. And I cannot believe that that is popular with people.
Oh, dude, I know. Like I was in their newest
Math
build.
problems.
Yeah, in their newest build, they had like you had to do all these classes and like chemistry and shit. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this?
it
I
really
thought that was fascinating.
you can really tell how Annie feels about romance games because she's like, why would I want any chemistry and shit?
Wow. Uh, the puns.
um,
It's too early for this.
Now, interestingly enough, being a dick absolutely has no close relations at all, correct?
You mean like incest?
Yeah.
Oh,
Your main character just.
Yeah, no, I don't think it does.
There isn't like mom doesn't come visit the school. There
Your
isn't
mom
like
actually is gone. I think it's
you
just
don't
your
have
dad.
a sister back home who like magically appears all of a sudden.
Yeah, I don't
Like
think you
all
have
the
that.
I
other
don't think he's
tropes.
into that.
But all these other tropes. So that is purely and it's probably one of the reasons that it smoothly did so well on Patreon and Steam.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It was 100% compliant with all of the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Lockhart,
It's actually not.
you don't have any
It's actually
experience
not.
with compliance with Steam at all, so
Ooh.
Hey, Avalon is on Steam.
You're like, I have
So I
one
have
game
some.
on Steam. I think your Penny
My
Bill's on
first
Steam too.
game.
On Steam as well, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it's free though. Mm-hmm.
Nothing wrong with that. It's not a
Yeah,
finished. It's not a finished game. Are you going to be one of those people who charges money for an unfinished game?
I might.
He's like, watch me.
It's like
Depends on what happens next.
I'm gonna sell out. I'm totally okay with that. We'll call it Penny for Your Thoughts, Chapter 1 and 2.
You should just make it cost a penny.
Don't be stupid.
What?
I think there's
That'd be clever, but
I think there's a
annoying.
minimum threshold. I think that would be more work than it's worth. It ends
Two
up,
pennies.
Can you imagine having to bust your credit card out?
For just a
You
penny?
charged a penny.
yeah, I'd like
And
to
Steam would take that penny.
Well, and watch Visa
Oh, you're
and
right.
MasterCard have like some minimum fee they charge per transaction that they ding you with.
Oh my
So
god.
you end up, yes, I am bankrupted from charging this for a penny.
If you go through PayPal, each transaction is like 20 cents or something.
Oh, well, there you go.
Okay, well
So-
then 21 cents.
Okay, stop. And then you've got one developer next for our final game.
Yeah, he has 3 games. So it's Man of the House, which I think is probably one of the most popular incest games.
On Steam.
I would say,
Yeah,
yeah.
on Steam. Well, because it was there so early,
Mm-hmm.
it
Yeah.
still sells well.
Yeah, and then they had Mystwood Manor, which I actually really liked. And
Unfortunately,
then,
it did not do nearly as well.
I know. But their newest game is Midnight Sin, which I think harkens back into Man of the House a lot, which makes sense. You know, Mystwood Manor didn't do as well as Man of the House, so it makes sense that they're going back, to their roots.
Which it was funny because you don't normally like management games.
No, I don't.
But you liked Mystwood Manor,
Yeah, I think it was just because it was just fun.
and it really looked
easy.
well polished. Too.
Yeah. The UI was like beautiful, honestly, and it was fun to play.
All that Man of the
The man
House
knows
money
how to
went some
code.
way.
He does know how to code.
Yeah.
Were you developing when Man of the House was in development, or had you not gotten into the space yet, Lockhart?
I've been doing this since 2019, late 2019.
So, was Man of the House like an influence to you?
No, dating my daughter was,
Oh,
That makes sense. Like with Avalon.
actually.
Yeah.
Avalon, I took a little bit from Babysitter,
Oh, okay. Yeah, that also makes
at least
sense.
in the beginning.
Yeah. And wasn't Avalon like it didn't have adult content in the beginning, and then you like added?
I was originally not going to do adult content, but whenever I
Oh.
started adding adult content, it really opened me up. I mean, I experienced new things and I found new things that I liked, and it was just this really great experience for me. And so I kept going and I started testing the limits a little bit, and that's when I got burned.
that's so
Aw.
sad.
Yeah, you flew too
It's
close to the
I
sun.
know, it's like you got Icarus right here. It's like my hubris
hmm
was my exploration of sexuality.
Aw.
Oh.
Yep. And now I'm charred.
Well, at
He's
least you
just a
didn't
crisp
drown in the sea.
Well, I'm trying to
waiting.
keep my head above water right now.
Yeah, exactly. What's it called? It's called
Yeah.
like it's not wafting.
What?
Wading in water? The
Waiting?
thing, the thing where
Hmm.
you like you kick your legs and your arms at the same time to keep your head above water. What's it?
Paddling?
No, no. What's it called? It's called. I'm gonna be I'm gonna be mad when
I
I
don't
find
know.
Treading water?
maybe. What did I say? Wading? Yes, treading.
Yes,
That's
okay.
close.
There you go.
I meant that.
All right. So, thematically, what is the overarching similarity with the three games? Is it just that it's different close proximity scenarios, and that's and different
Yeah.
stories as part of that?
Yeah, so like Man of the House, you're with your mom and two sisters, and then in Mystwood Manor, you're with your mom and your sister, and your dad dies. What happens to the dad in Man of the House? Does he die?
I don't think we ever see it. It isn't clarified.
Okay.
Man of the House is really early in
Oh.
the space, so it's a lot of rudimentary stuff. There's a lot of stuff left unsaid.
Yeah, because I think maybe he was just out of the house all the time.
I don't even know if there's like an overarching storyline aside from just the, well, of course I'm trying to seduce all the people around me. What else would I be doing?
Yeah, yeah.
So, an actual storyline? What do you think I am, Lockhart?
And then
I think that was a compliment.
it was.
Maybe backhanded.
Thank you.
Just
Yeah, a
take,
little bit.
yeah, just take
I'll
it.
take
It's
it.
okay. So and then you have Midnight Sin, and which is essentially where your dad dies again, and you have your okay. So this is the part where I don't know how to talk about it. So do I talk about him just being a bodyguard?
Yeah, you say he's a bodyguard. And I will always love you.
Okay.
I gotta ask, what's the reference between the two, the
I don't-
song and the bodyguard?
I don't know.
It's from the movie The Bodyguard.
Oh, I've never seen that.
It won an Oscar for Best Song.
It did?
It was Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston.
You just sound like one of those
Must
like
be
old
from your
men.
generation.
And
Yes.
it was called The Bodyguard.
You sound
And
like
that's
an old
what
man
the
rambling.
song comes from. Okay, whatever. We'll cut that out.
No, I'm leaving that in.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in Midnight Sin, you're a bodyguard with, I guess, 4 women.
Some
One
number of
older,
women.
one a little bit less older, and then 2 younger.
So a same familial configuration.
Yeah,
just
but
not
all
family.
yeah, and you're all just stuck in this house that you're, I guess, guarding.
I thought you were guarding the bodies,
Yeah, you're guarding the bodies.
not the
Yeah.
house.
Well, you're kind of guarding the house. You're kind of just like seeing if everything's,
So wouldn't you be a house
Bodies
guard
are in the
then?
house.
yeah, guarding the bodies that are in the house, which essentially means that he's guarding the house. So
Yep.
you're also a
Extrapolate out.
Is
Yeah.
there? Does he work out of a guardhouse?
No, he gets his own room.
His own room.
If he was in a guardhouse, that would be amazing.
Of course he
He's
does.
guarding the house. Then it's very clear. You guard the house from the guardhouse.
They should
Oh,
add that.
Well, then he's obviously a bodyguard
Yeah,
because he's not a house guard.
that's yeah. Okay. He's also a designated driver, so he drives all the the
What is this?
the people in the house.
Downton Abbey?
Yeah.
Yes, he's our driver.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of bodyguard drives. You usually have a driver.
No, you can have that. It really,
really?
depends on socioeconomics.
Oh, okay.
More money, you're gonna have more
It's a big house.
separate roles.
But I guess, yeah.
But then the problem is, if you're gonna hire multiple people, then you're gonna have sexual conflict, and people
Oh, dude, that would
changes
be
the flavor.
interesting.
Why are
That
you
would
trying
be...
to add NTR to this game?
I'm not. I'm just...
You're like, oh, that would be so interesting. Let's put some of that dynamic in there.
Stop it. I was just thinking about it. I was like, oh, interesting. That could be a cool thing. I'm not asking them to add that, okay?
You're being that person.
I'm not being that person.
You send them a message. Hey, have you considered adding these 16 things that would completely change your game?
Oh, God.
Hey, all these flavors that you're focusing on for the last 3 games, here's some extra stuff that will completely change everything.
And last podcast, I was like, oh, yeah, no, you should be making a game that makes you happy.
And you're like, no.
I'm like, well, I know I said that, but...
I'm concerned about the security logistics that we have in place here, and I think we need more staff to truly make sure these people are safe. And he would look at you like, are you dumb? This is a premise for the same game that I've been making these previous times. What are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
He's not actually guarding their bodies. He is despoiling their bodies.
I don't even know what to say to that.
All right, so I think we've touched on this theme, and let's get into why are incest games so popular.
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, so there is an historical cross-cultural phenomenon with incest. So, but the biggest problem when talking about incest is that, every society seems to have a different way of defining it. So, like in Canada, you have the first degree rule, where you can't have immediate family like mom and dad and siblings, and then any variation of step person. But you can have cousins, uncles, aunts, and grandparents. So.
Grandparents?
I mean, if you're into it. I don't know.
Well, cousins was always real popular, right? I mean, it was encouraged to keep things in the.
I think we're gonna get to that.
Oh,
right?
yeah. In historical sense. Yeah, well, so it seems ubiquitous up until the Iron Age, which is when we really started to see regulation. So, for example,
limited.
It's up for debate.
I think that you need a certain degree of life expectancy before you're going to notice the damage of the recessive traits that you get from close unions.
Mm-hmm.
And you still even have tribal societies or remnants of tribal societies in the world today where there are genetically closer relationships than cousins, because yes, they're marrying cousins, but you marry cousins enough time, you're technically closer than genetically than you get from a standard first cousin pairing, a consanguineous pairing, if you will.
It sounds like you're saying penguin.
Yes, the penguinous pairing.
Penguinous.
And then it's not like we didn't know that there were problems with this. King Tut was completely a mutant.
Oh, yeah, when they dug him up.
Yeah, because of the rampant inbreeding. And so I think we all know it is not a great outcome, but there seems to still be this obsession with it. Lockhart, you were talking about cousins, and that's the entire European royal family.
All the monarchs.
Yeah, just completely inbred, and that's why hemophilia was such an issue.
Yeah.
It's this recessive thing that, well, what do you mean? Of course, that's just what we do here. And not that I'm saying anything about the British royal family. They're perfect and awesome, and legally I don't know if you're allowed to say anything bad about them.
But I mean, was it more enticing for people earlier on to have relations with family members, or was it just a natural thing? It wasn't like, oh, this is way hotter. This is way spicier.
I mean, it may
It
have
was more
been.
just
So whenever we want to explore something like this, we probably need to look at hunter-gatherer societies. And
Okay.
one of the unfortunate realities of the human condition is most procreation in the history of our species was not consensual. Most
true.
procreation, the further back we go, the less consensual sexual acts are. The more violent, the more forced, the more. I mean, just think of the amount of genetic diversity that has historically come in the form of conquest. So,
Genghis Khan.
yeah, and the reality is that that was not consensual sex.
Mm-hmm.
That's and we can talk about it. Oh, it's contextualized and everything else. I'm not throwing stones here. I'm just saying, okay, hey, that's going to happen. Um, and when you have small tribes of people, when you have people sharing closed spaces, when you have people, how many rooms do you have in a house in the Bronze Age? You
One,
well, no, and we see that.
maybe
We
two.
see, especially in these cities where they have rooms on top of rooms and everything else, and
Mm-hmm.
you have all these people crammed together.
Yeah,
The
and I guess the idea of getting with someone closer to you rather than a stranger was probably more appealing, right?
from a protection
Neighbor?
standpoint, keeping your tribe, reinforcing the ties of your
Yeah.
tribe, that makes sense. And we do have mechanisms that we see. One of the reasons that you would have your children marry them off, we're marrying off children as soon as they're hitting puberty in many cases. How many societies have adulthood rituals or thresholds around the time of puberty? Judaism does.
Hmm.
And so the idea that we're getting them married off, and we're getting them in more appropriate, less dangerous unions, sending children off to learn a trade, things like that. You're getting them out of that one room household. You are creating mechanics that invariably minimize the amount of incest that's going to transpire.
Did they see it like that? Or did
Um,
they only see it like
Social
for.
structures happen for a reason. It's not
Mm-hmm.
always a good reason, but they happen for a reason. And we don't always question why things are the way they are once they become part of tradition.
Yeah.
So, but I think that if there was not some type of predisposition towards incest, if there wasn't some type of cross cultural, like you said, historical precedent of this happening, I don't think we would have all of the rules and social constructs and everything else to prevent it from happening.
Hmm. Okay.
If it was just something that never happened, we wouldn't have all of these rules and regulations and social policies and everything else to keep it from happening. Obviously, our lizard brain, there's something going on with that. And I think that is reflected in the amount of fiction that tackles it, especially sexualized fiction.
I do have to ask though, what about the Westermark effect? I mean, when did that start taking effect? It seems like to me natural selection would not want people to have relations with close family members. It would prefer variety, right? So it would favor not having sexual relations with family members, right?
So the
We
hard
should be going the opposite direction. We should be not interested in that,
the
right?
the hard thing to know is that when you live in a society, you're going to be a product of that society. And I know that's glib, but and if a society has constructs that minimize or mitigate close family pairings from occurring, we have to acknowledge that's going to have an impact. So, one of the difficulties with trying to figure out how humans actually respond to stimulus is that you have to experiment on humans in order to get results. And we really don't want to experiment on humans to find out these results. This
Yeah.
is
I
one of
volunteer as tribute.
Oh
okay.
my god.
Okay. This is once
I
again.
get it, and there is a theory that a lot of flavors that people are interested in stem from childhood, either trauma or influence or a consequence of the way that they were nurtured. And yes, there's no definitive proof or evidence of how that all works. But at the same time, when we're talking about incest, it seems like we would be pulled away from that. So is it that it's taboo? Is that why it's so intriguing? Or does it have something to do with a maternal interest, like you need to be cared for?
Hmm.
Or in the case of man of the house, is it more I have to take care of my family? And in order to do that, I need to take care of them financially and sexually. I need them to respect me as the man of the house. And one way to do that is to have them be sexually subservient to me.
I think that there is some type of primal aspect to all of these flavors. And yes, from a dominant standpoint, from some type of like Neolithic caveman, and okay, maybe sure, okay. Once again, that lizard brain kind of thing. Like in Japan, I know you're going to talk about the Tokyo,
Oh, the Tokyo Metropolitan Ordinance on Health Development of Youth
but
Provision.
one of the things that they were finding in Japan is that
Nice.
the people who seem to be consuming the most of the incest content in Japan were people who had no siblings.
Hmm.
So I think that in some cases this could be idealized, this could be fetishized, this could be
Oh, by only children?
yeah.
Oh.
So it's like, oh well, it's not the same thing because I think that once again we need to acknowledge there's a huge difference between our fantasies and our fictional consumption of those things and reality and what
Well,
we actually do as humans.
I have two sisters, so
So,
And so
so
for Lockhart's next game, I have two sisters in real life, and I can't believe I'm doing this. It's a good Japanese title. It's.
thanks.
There
Had
you
to
go.
take it to the weird place all the way.
Oh
So
man.
no, so actually I've talked with a lot of my fans and I've noticed a trend. It seems that a lot of people do have daughters and the response that I always get is even if they have daughters or sisters or mothers, they don't actually have any interest in them in real life. I mean, this is just a fantasy thing. So it's strange that it's only a fantasy, like non-consensual fantasies that women seem to have. It's like what 70% of women have non-consensual fantasies. They don't actually want it to happen,
hmm, yeah.
but they like to read about it in fiction or
I think that fantasizing about the loss of control in a controlled environment is very empowering. So you're talking about dominating the family, fantasizing about control to that degree, especially in an environment where none of us have any control over our family. Just think of how awesome the American Thanksgiving dinner is every year when you visit your family and you get all of the politics that you really want to hear about.
Everyone's just so happy.
So I think that it could be that we are fantasizing about something that is more chaotic in a way that controls it and makes it safe and makes us feel like we have agency in a world where we really don't. So being able to control a fantasy where violence is done to us, being able to control a fantasy where we don't necessarily have agency, that can be very empowering because it
well,
gives
I
us
I meant
control.
that only as an example. I didn't mean
hmm.
to dive off onto non-con.
Well, but this is all non-con. I mean, let's own that.
Well, I
Patreon.
think it's non-con. It's only non-consensual because it's considered very taboo, right? It seems
No,
like the
no,
most taboo.
it's considered non-consensual because you cannot consent if there is a power imbalance. If you are compromised, you cannot consent. And in any type of family dynamic, there is a power imbalance. And because there is a power imbalance, even if they're all adults, because there is a power imbalance, you cannot truly consent. And that's just how it works. Now,
But if
unfortunately,
you look at Milfy City,
yes.
the boy is clearly much younger and much weaker than his sister, who is much older and has at least 50 pounds on him. So
Yes,
how do you mean power imbalance?
power imbalances don't always have to do with who's bigger and stronger.
Physical.
Power imbalances,
Sure.
like for example, the video that Annie got most savaged in is what, Annie?
Mass Effect?
And what did you say in the Mass Effect video? Shepard was the commanding officer,
Oh,
and
right. And he was a rapist.
you could,
Right.
and legally
Which
in
people got a lot
most
really mad.
militaries they say that yes, if you're commanding officer and he can put, and literally you have a scenario where whoever you choose to have a romance with is the person that you don't send off to their death.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that's a power imbalance. So Shepard could have been weaker or smaller. In this case, he wasn't, but he could have been. But the power imbalance is because of the control that he had over the other characters. And
Now, the way that I wrote A Petal Among Thorns, it is actually the younger woman who is seducing her guardian. So is that still considered non-consensual?
yes, because it's still a power imbalance. If the
But see,
war,
that's what I mean. It's always a power imbalance.
correct, but that's the point. Trying to find purely consensual sexual fiction is a fool's errand. You're never going to do it. You're never going to have a completely consensual fictional scenario because you're exploring sex. You're exploring these things. In order to explore those things, you are having your own agency, and your own agency is in some way, shape, or form going to rob these other fictional characters of their agency because you want a particular outcome. You play a game, and let's say you play a gay game. Annie, are there men in a gay game who aren't gay?
No.
No, you want all of those men to be gay because if one of those men is heterosexual,
It's like, why is he here?
yes. But think about that. Mathematically, that would not happen. And so, this idea that all of these people are going to consent and all of this, like Baldur's Gate, all of those characters, you have a way to romance every single one of those characters, which means every single one of those characters has to be written in a way that are 100% accepting of whatever gender you take, whatever species you take, whatever characteristics you have, or anything else. That is robbing those fictional characters of their agency because they're
I
fictional.
I understand what you're saying, but my point is that since it's always technically non-consensual, there's always going to be a power imbalance in every relationship.
Yes,
If a rich man takes a young woman out to dinner, there's a power imbalance,
correct.
or
And
vice versa.
we are learning in real life, like the idea of informed consent didn't really exist when I was growing up, but it's one of those things where, oh yeah, this makes a lot of sense. And yes, we would like to live in a society where there's less rape. Fortunately, we do. This is a less violent world we live in than when I was growing up. That doesn't mean it's perfect. That doesn't mean it's great. But it does mean that, hey, better is a good thing to have. And that doesn't mean we want to stop making it better. But yes, you cannot have incest relationships that are consensual. It just doesn't work. The power dynamics just don't work that way. And that's why Patreon says this is unacceptable non-consensual sex. Just like you can't have sex with a horse. The horse can't consent. Patreon bans bestiality. Patreon says you cannot have violent sex because that violent sex is implying lack of consent. That's why they say you can't have sex with people that are young because young people cannot
But
consent.
that's my point. That's my point is everything that they don't like, they put under that umbrella of non-consensual.
And they're
I mean,
not
mind
wrong.
control,
They're not wrong.
censorship is a form of mind control. So they're technically mind controlling us.
Okay, but
Oh,
as
whoa.
they are allowed
Turned the
to
tables there, didn't I?
they are allowed to do whatever they want to do on their platform. They're allowed to
They're
allow
allowed.
or not
Yes.
allow whatever they want to allow. Now, if you want to look at it from a fun standpoint, all of these flavors are sexuality, right? They are manifestations of an individual's sexuality, right?
Hmm.
So, isn't Patreon regulating the flavors that are allowed technically discrimination based on sexuality?
That's what I'm
Yes.
saying.
So,
And
and
you're right.
but the problem is right now we understand homosexual or heterosexual or bisexual as sexuality. And that's how we're taught to see it. But how much is, oh, I like feet, or I like big boobs, or I like whatever. Um, Annie and femboys. How do you
What?
feel about femboys, Annie?
They're fine.
Are they fine or are they fine?
Both?
Them some fine femboys.
Oh my god.
Lockhart's newest game.
I,
I can't believe my
I,
two sisters are actually femboys.
so, so is taboo part of it though? I mean, is it the fact that it is against the rules? Is there some spice involved there?
People do want to kind of experience a flavor that, pushes boundaries without legal ramifications.
But here's the flip side of this coin, okay?
Okay.
If something being illegal makes people more curious to explore it,
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't when homosexuality was illegal, wouldn't there be more gay people then? Because oh, it's illegal, it's taboo, let's explore it. So something
But it was underground, so there's no way to say for sure how many people were interested in that
do you
flavor.
think of if you are a heterosexual individual?
I'm also talking about fiction.
Hold on, but let's
Not-
let's go down this
okay.
rabbit hole. If you're a heterosexual
Yeah.
individual, can you conceptualize a scenario where you're going to be homosexual? And if you're a homosexual individual, can you conceptualize a scenario where you're going to be heterosexual? And if your answer is a firm no, then the taboo nature of heterosexual homosexual, because you can have very taboo heterosexual, you can have very taboo homosexual. If that taboo is not changing how you fantasize, if it's not changing how you consume flavors, then it's more to it than just it being not allowed.
Your argument is that it's not necessarily that it's taboo that makes it spicy?
I think that there is a biological component to sexuality, and I think that there is an environmental component to sexuality. And I think that something being taboo can be part of the environmental component of sexuality. But the flavors that we like are, in some ways, by the time we're an adult, the flavors that we like are almost hardwired into our brains. So them
Do you think
being
electroshock therapy would switch up some of my interests?
Oh, jeez.
I can't
Just
believe
floss in the
I
brain a little
can't
bit.
believe my two sisters are femboys from electroshock therapy.
What?
You ruined it.
I think that we like what we like. By the time we're adults, yes, that can change a little bit, and yes, that can continue to evolve. But the older we get, the more set we are in our ways, and I think that includes sex and sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, I played dating my daughter, and that is what awoke something inside of me that I did not know was there. And I kind of wish the monster didn't come out of the cage because now it's getting me in trouble.
Did it awake something that you didn't know was there, or was it always there and you were just shown that?
Well, maybe that's what awaking is. Like, it's always there, but it's
But this
dormant
idea that
and
it
suppressed.
didn't exist
Right.
before,
That's true. People do think
Oh, I'm
that
not saying
yeah,
it didn't.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I think that the whole point of having safe and healthy outlets is so that we don't manifest this stuff in real life. We don't
Mhm.
have the cascading mental illness that comes with sexual suppression. We don't have the sexual violence that comes with sexual suppression. We don't have all of this. Having safe and healthy outlets is important. And if these are core aspects of a person's sexuality. Tokyo
Well, people don't wake
Metropolitan.
up and choose these interests, right?
Well, but yeah, but you want to talk about the Tokyo Metropolitan scenario?
Yeah, I
Oh,
can.
okay.
So it makes sense that, we see it in fiction, incest, especially fiction of a sexual nature. And it's probably one of the most popular flavors. So popular, in fact, that Tokyo had to regulate it in its manga and anime that were marketed towards minors. So in 2010, a Bill 156, the Tokyo Metropolitan Ordinance on Health Development of Youth Provision, that's a name, focused mainly on creating restrictions to regulate media, toys, and indecent behavior that may hinder the proper development of youth. So, and manga pretty much fell under this. And it was actually enacted in 1964, but it wasn't really enforced until the 2010s. And even then, enforced was taken pretty lightly. They kind of just made it harder to access it or buy it, because they never really had the power to outright ban the anime and manga. And like any society, people kind of just found ways to go around the restrictions. So, like creating new websites, new apps, or finding ways to navigate the old websites. So,
But there was an impact from that because
oh yeah,
in anime especially, you have a lot less incest as that seemed to be for anime. There was a time where it felt like there was like an incest plot line in every anime.
yeah. The one that comes to mind, the big one that comes to mind for me is Sao,
Yeah.
Sword Art Online, and him with his, what was it,
Sister cousin.
Yeah, sister cousin.
It's like,
I think
oh,
it's
you're
cousin.
well, it's cousin,
I
but
don't
they
think they were
lived.
related.
No, it was his cousin.
He was like
It was-
adopted or something.
It was his first cousin, but they called themselves brother and sister, which makes me wonder if the character was supposed to be a sister, and the law went into effect because it was a web novel
Oh.
first.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder if that was a modification to turn her into a cousin. And because the way they explain it is, oh, she's my cousin, but I call her my sister.
Oh, that's
So-
why it was so confusing.
And
And
see, censorship ruins another story.
Yeah, honestly.
I want to see when Sword Art Online was first written.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a web novel from 2002 to 2008. So
That's why.
I wonder if that was just a modification that was done.
Huh.
Because I know that he added a canonical sex scene to.
What?
Well, because it was a web novel and it was serialized into a light novel.
Yeah.
And there are just how you have rules about YA and what you can and can't have in YA books.
Yeah, all the tension, but no sex scenes.
in manga and in certain manga and certain
That must be frustrating.
Oh, it is. Especially for like a young teenager reading those. Dude.
Yeah,
So what you're saying
I
is
can't imagine.
the Hunger Games was about a different kind of hunger.
Yeah.
The,
Yeah.
the thirst trap games.
Oh, God.
Should have been called Hungry Eyes.
But you have rules about what you can have in a manga, what you can have in a light novel. This was a High School DxD. There was actually a rule that they were told, the writer was told, we can do your insane, ecchi fan service thing. However, the rule is he can never have sex in the story. So it can be implied that things are happening in between chapters or in between books and everything else, but he can never have sex, and that was a rule. So with Sao, he wrote it takes place during the first arc, and he wrote you can find it online, but it is he wrote his own fan fiction for this thing because he couldn't make it official, so it is a technically non-canonical, but it's really what happened about their first sexual encounter.
You mean
in the
him
game.
and Asaka?
Yeah, in the
Or
game.
Asuna,
Yeah,
yeah.
Asuna in the game.
Wow.
So
Wait, Asuna was somebody he met in the virtual
correct,
world.
correct.
Mm-hmm.
Best girl.
You're talking about Lifa?
No. There are no sex scenes in Sword Art Online. He added this to be like, because one of the nice things about that first arc was you didn't have a stupid romance that like fledgling romance where nothing ever happens and the MC
yeah.
never takes action. This was a situation where once the MC knew he liked the girl, he's like, "Yo, let's do it," and it was just a nice
Went
change of
after.
pace as opposed to what was it, Infinite Stratos, that was the mech one where like it was like a harem, but the guy could not understand that all of the
Oh,
girls liked him, and it was the
yeah.
most frustrating thing to ever watch.
I couldn't finish it. It was maddening. I couldn't do it. It's
What they
like,
call
why
it?
is
I
this guy
do
so
have a
stupid?
question.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yes.
So what happened? Where did the shift take place to where incest was suddenly so taboo that it had to be outlawed? I mean, was there a good reason for it
Oh,
to start being outlawed, or was it just
I
it
don't mean to
wasn't.
anti-porn
I
crusaders?
don't want to sound Alex Jones, but in Japan specifically, the biggest agitator was actually UNICEF,
Yeah, yeah. It
which is
was.
just hilarious
What is
because
UNICEF?
UNICEF is the United Nations children's organization where they look for like to protect children and say they're the most bland, like inoffensive organization you can possibly think of, but for some reason they really hate Japan and they
Yeah, and
really
they were going after Japan for years before this actually happened, and
and and there's also the Japan was one of the first countries to really deal with the negative population growth and the problem of that. And it's easy to say, oh well, people are having less babies because there's too much incest manga. And there were lots of arguments about why they should outlaw this. But as for that,
Oh,
every post
a
post
scapegoat.
every post industrial society seems to be hitting negative population growth. It seems to be cross cultural. It seems to be once you hit a certain level of economic development, once you hit a certain level of prosperity, whatever you want to call it, we just seem to not be having babies.
well, yeah, because if everything's fine and dandy, and
Hunky dory.
you don't have to do anything to get food or survive. Why would you
Well,
want to have
well,
babies?
okay. So I think there are a lot of explanations for why it's happening,
Mm-hmm.
but none of those explanations satisfy the reality that it's happening everywhere.
Well, it's not grounded in logic, reason, or data.
Yeah, well, why would we ever do
That's the
research?
real issue.
Why would we ever do research? Using logic, reason, and data. That's madness.
It's just it's so fascinating that it's actually doing the opposite of what they want. It's making people more sexually frustrated and more likely to do what they don't want them to do in non-con.
Yeah.
So it's not a perfect system, and we're not trying to pick on Patreon
It's
here.
not a perfect system.
We're not
No,
trying.
and I wouldn't. They haven't actually given me any trouble yet. I mean, I foresee
Yes.
it, but they've actually been very decent to me compared to itch.io, who just banned me out of the blue with no explanation and no chance of conforming to their unwritten, unstated new regulations and rules.
Uh,
So I'm actually not that displeased with Patreon. I just know that it's coming, and I think that it's coming to Subscribestar too.
Oh
well,
yeah, I think it's eventually
You
just
know,
coming
I
to
think
everything.
so what?
right.
So
Oh yeah, the alternatives.
yeah. So without okay,
Mm.
we gotta say this right.
Hmm.
So we are not endorsing or supporting any position one way or another. We're
Mm-hmm.
just talking here
Mm-hmm.
because
Yes.
I think it's very important that we're not advocating that because that's not what we're doing. We're talking about fiction first of all. We're
Mm-hmm.
talking about people exploring their sexuality. Now, if Patreon has an issue with sexuality, okay, that's between them and the EEOC, I guess.
I guess, yeah.
But um, what are some alternatives for developers looking to make games that they may not be able to make on a Patreon, they may not be able to make on a Steam?
Okay, so I was thinking if places in the US are so bad, then why not look outside of the US?
Mm-hmm.
And so we were just talking about Japan, and I was like, okay, well, what are Japanese developers doing? What platforms are they using?
Mm-hmm.
And they're really using just two things. They're using CN and Dlsite. CN is it's CI-EN.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's another way to say it. I just call it CN. But CN's basically the Japanese iteration of Patreon.
Okay.
So that's what that is.
Oh, Annie, let me just ask you, have you seen any Daz games on
Uh,
either of those platforms?
I was gonna say that. So I was actually thinking,
Okay.
okay, so is this a viable solution? And so I actually found Daz games on Dlsite. Yes, they are.
Really?
Yeah, I was surprised too.
They're more cartoony though.
Well, so there's this game called Sex Revenge, and it is more stylized. But I mean, I would say Lockhart's games are stylized.
Yeah.
Stylized is very just.
Yeah, it's an
Yeah.
aesthetic. Okay. CIEN and Dlsite, it's the same parent company, right?
Mm-hmm.
Were you able to see in the policies and guidelines where they did not allow a circle because of Daz?
No, I didn't see Daz listed,
Uh-huh.
but I didn't see Daz not listed. So
Okay.
it's like I think you could talk to somebody about it.
Would you need to have the Japanese censorship standards if you put a game on there?
Yeah, that would be one of the biggest issues is that Japanese games do have censorship.
Mosaics.
Yeah, mosaics
Mhm.
or, like the censor bars. So you would have to censor your game.
Mm-hmm.
But you can probably make a patch for it and put it on CN.
But here comes the problem. Patches can get you in a lot of trouble.
Yes.
Especially if you need to be, what is it? In Japan, it's CERO, CERO.
Yes.
You want to be compliant and you want to keep Dlsite out of trouble. So it does make sense that a developer moving to a Japanese platform.
You also have to worry about language barriers, but they do offer English staff. So I don't.
English, Korean, Chinese, and Japanese, I think, are the languages supported with the staff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you have to make a game in the Japanese language, or can you do it in English
No.
and sell it there?
No, you can do it in English.
My second question would be, is it even going to be a viable option? Like, are enough people going to be interested to make it worth it?
I don't know. I think somebody would have
don't
to.
So Kagura
Try.
has made a very successful business model out of taking Dlsite games and bringing them to the West. I wonder if there is a viable direction in the other way.
Now, I actually did reach out to Kagura and ask them if they would support any of my work, and I never heard back from them.
I don't think
So
they,
it's
Yeah,
too
that-
bad too.
Daz games on Kagura, I don't know if
that's not their wheelhouse, I don't think.
Yeah, I just focused on Daz
Very
games.
unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. But,
And
they have their style.
Even Kagura has had games, at least one game, banned by Steam. So no one's
Steam
no
is
one's
erratic.
no one's perfect at this, and I think you guys are all kind of struggling to find the way forward, and it's not always fair. I mean, like with this Gumroad thing that we started with, it's not like Gumroad told you a short period of time ago, yes, we'd love to work with you, and now they can't because they panicked. I remember when you did your OnlyFans video, you talked about when Pornhub had Visa and MasterCard.
Yeah, I guess the context of what he just said.
Yeah.
Phrasing.
Yeah.
Pornhub pulled their had credit cards pulled from Pornhub,
Mm-hmm.
and Pornhub panicked and responded, and that's where you saw the purge of all of the incest
Yeah.
videos that Pornhub had on it. Sticking with the context here, so now you have stepbrother, stepsister, stuff like that, where before it was just brother sister, and that
Yeah.
was part of Pornhub being compliant with MasterCard.
Yeah, and I think the guy who's in charge of Gumroad, he stated it on, I think it's Twitter, where he was like, yeah, our hands are kind of tied with this. We really had no choice because of Strive and PayPal.
But if his hands are tied, will he be able to consent?
I
A
mean,
lot of people are into that.
if he signs a 50-page document, I guess.
So seriously, what Gumroad is telling us is this is a non-consensual bondage scenario with
God.
MasterCard.
Yep.
He's like, he had no safe word.
The irony there is astounding too.
That's
So I gotta wonder how this is actually legal to crack down on an entire genre
It
without any legal
it's
repercussions at
it's
all.
legal because these are all private businesses. So
yeah.
MasterCard
A
can do.
bank? But imagine that. I mean, imagine if you go to the store to buy a candy bar and you're going to hand a $5 bill to the cashier, but somebody comes in between you two and says, "No, I will not let you make this transaction."
You,
Is that legal?
okay, the what we're dealing with is we're dealing with transnational corporations like Visa and Mastercard who are trying to navigate the laws of over 100 different countries, and what they're doing and what they're allowing is going to be tricky. And
Universal?
um, it's going to be tricky. So, for example, um, you talk about, okay, we can't agree as a planet on what the definition of incest is. We can't agree. In most developed nations, uh, first cousins can get married, and a lot of the world, some parts of the United States, China, a lot of Asia, a lot of Africa, first cousins can't get married. So is that acceptable? Is it not acceptable? We can't agree as a planet on simple things like what is and is not incest. How on earth are we going to be able to agree about something as complicated as what is acceptable financial transactions or not? So this is hard, and we used to depend on governments to decide for us and make legislation to say this is allowed, this is not allowed. That's just not the world we live in now. Governments are slow to act. Businesses seem to be more agile in how they respond to things, and there's good and there's bad to that.
If I go out to the street and I start selling this stuff for cash, I can do that legally.
It depends on where you are. You are There are obscenity laws that you would have to deal with given the nature of your content. And you live in the United States. I don't know if you tell people what state you live in the United States, but you live in the United States. And the United States has different laws than Europe does. The United States has different laws than Asia does. And what you can and cannot do is going to be dictated
So
by.
you're saying that there cannot be local payment processors.
Well, yeah, but
They
you
have to be global?
the global ones, if they want to be transnational, they have to be in compliant with all of those nations they're dealing with. And you're not just selling to people in the same neighborhood as where you live. You're selling to people in Uzbekistan. You're selling to people in Sweden. You're selling to people in Korea. And because of that, you are dependent on a payment provider that will do business with all of those places. And because
Now,
you're
the payment provider is deciding for us what we're allowed to. This is not decided upon
the payment
any
provider
legal body.
is interpreting what they see as the laws and regulations and coming to this conclusion. Because, and this is a whole different video, because the payment provider believes that most sex and adult content falls under the umbrella of human trafficking, which you talked about in the OnlyFans video.
Hmm.
Now, whether that's
Yeah.
right or wrong or true or not true, that's the position they've taken. And so, what does incest games have to do with that? Well, they have determined that these non-consensual things are adjacent to human trafficking, and because Visa and MasterCard specifically got in trouble before for helping human traffickers, for helping terrorists, for helping these organizations that you're not supposed to help. Because they got in trouble for
They
that,
want to step away from it.
they not only that, but they need to show that they're making it better.
Ah,
That they're not the same way. They're much better, and it's easier to pick on porn peddlers
mm-hmm.
because no one's going to stand up for them other than you, Annie.
So I'm a terrorist.
You're terrorist adjacent.
Yeah, the
I'm
adjacent.
terrorizing this
and
market
and
with my
the
dirty,
the
filthy work.
the argument is that because human trafficking is illegal,
I
People
get it, man.
people who commit terrorism are more likely to use those illegal forms of funding to do their thing. So arms dealing, drugs selling, all of these things were classified as terrorism adjacent.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry, and that's why things are being done to your space like they are.
So they can mail me $5 and I could send them a flash drive and that would be illegal.
Oh man, I don't even know what the rules are about interstate transfer of stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole point of these digital platforms is they're doing the work for you. That is so much easier, that is so much safer for you and for the consumer. You're just looking for a platform that's going to allow your creative exploration that you say that you appreciate, but then you also lament the beginning of. So,
I don't think there's going to be a platform left to stand on here in a few years. I think that we're going to have to start tailoring our content down to be compliant to these. And I think the rules are going to get worse too. You know, the umbrella is going to expand. That's what I'm worried about. Is like, how do we stop the bleeding? How do we stop this censorship from just taking over?
You don't. You move.
Yeah,
And I
and
think
that's unfortunate because they're just driving this stuff underground.
no, it's a market response.
it's a market response.
How
Yeah.
do you mean?
Well, because Patreon had its 2017 um, crackdown, and what was the market response to that 2017 crackdown? Some people modified their content, like Summertime Saga.
Mm-hmm.
Some people went to Subscribe Star, like Dating My Daughter.
Okay.
That is a market response.
Oh.
And people moving to a different place, moving to a Dlsite, changing your content. That is how humans deal with this. I mean, you can
Mm-hmm.
call it game theory if you want to.
But people's interests are not going to change. They're still going to be interested in the kind of content that is being rejected by society.
But here's the thing, okay?
So,
If you were to outlaw heterosexuality tomorrow, okay? People's sexuality is not going to fundamentally change. How
you're
they
just going to put more people in prison.
how they manifest that sexuality is going to change. And some people are going to suppress it, some people are going to cope with it, some people are going to do whatever. There's going to be a response. And there is a negative ramification to sexual suppression. That doesn't mean that all of the humans that are suppressing their sexuality are going to suffer, but a large portion of them are going to suffer. So that's still a market response. The crime rates increasing, things going
Yep.
underground, black markets emerging. Those are all market responses. Humans are very rational in how they do things in groups. It,
Clever.
it
They're
appears
very clever.
irrational, but then once you start seeing the same thing happen over and over and over again, eventually you're going to be like, oh, that's just how we work.
Yeah, that's what happened with the bill in Tokyo.
Yeah.
Yes, people just got around it. They created new websites, they created new apps, or they created ways to go around the rules.
And we're not advocating circumventing policy or circumventing
No,
laws,
no.
but we're not going to pretend that
That
it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is that they're killing the developers right now. So there will be developers later that come along and comply by circumventing. But like me, for example, I am not allowed on these platforms anymore.
Yeah.
Like no matter what I do.
So where were all
So
the
they're killing me.
hold on, but where were all the Western adult game developers in 2012?
Like
Nowhere.
what state?
They
No,
didn't
they
exist.
didn't exist.
Patreon
Sure.
helped to create the modern Western adult game market. So I don't know if we can complain about them killing it when they were the ones that helped create it as well.
Well,
So
if I have a child, I can't kill that child. I mean, once they get to a certain point. My father still wants an abortion. I keep telling him I'm 37 now. It's definitely murder. That was a joke. I'm just kidding.
That was a
He loves
joke.
me very much.
Oh my god. I'm gonna tell you right
But-
now, I'm
but-
very gullible, so I believed you.
Oh my God. No, me and my father have a very good relationship.
I can't.
But my point is that if you create something and bring it into the world and then destroy it, I mean, you know, it's poetic, I guess, but it's also kind of monstrous.
So what you're
And
saying?
I don't want to say anything negative about Patreon because
Mhm.
they have been very good to me. But it is pretty wild for itch.io to say just a couple of months ago before the big ban that, bring your content over here, we'll support it. And then boom, like without even telling us what's going on, they just
Listen, itch.io got its ass kicked
that's true.
by the Apple
I
Epic
sympathize.
trial. And then
Oh yeah.
the Apple, getting Sisterly
Yeah.
Lust dragged all. It was
Yeah.
great for Sisterly Lust sales, a game that's
For
also
the moment.
no longer allowed on itch.io. They banned
Mm-hmm.
Sisterly Lust too.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
still available on Steam.
For now.
Yeah.
uh,
Yep.
and that developer is still on Patreon.
For now.
But you have a real issue at itch. They got dragged like that, and then the whole proud father subpoena and everything else. I would have crapped my pants because it went from, okay, we're the joke of the internet for the next 5 months during the trial, but all of a sudden, oh, they're arresting people for making these games. Should we really have these games on this site that they're arresting people for, or are we going to be next? And I think that response, I understand why they did the response they did. You can say it was excessive. You can say it was unfair. You can
Oh,
say a lot
it's
of things.
like communicate with me. Tell me what's going on. Like I'm
Well,
not unsympathetic. I understand that there are changes happening,
but
but
from
like to just destroy me because I'm in your way?
they didn't see it as personal
Give me a
to you.
chance.
It's about survival. Gumroad is saying, "Yo, we got shanked by Mastercard and we are bleeding, and this is the only way we can survive." And they keep updating what they're going to allow, what they're not allowed because they're
Mm-hmm.
panicking.
Yeah.
Itch did this
Yeah.
panicking behind the scenes, and then they released in a smarmy kind of pretend, oh, we're not changing any of our policies, we're just coming into legal compliance, we're
Mm-hmm.
making sure we're legally compliant. And they removed, it was something like half, it ended up being like half the games that were offered
Yeah.
eventually. I mean, you can still be on itch just with a demo, you just aren't selling on itch.
I
And
mean, that's kind of bad for me. I can't grow as a company. There are expenses to this. So if I can't make money, I'm poisoned. I'm slowly dying.
or you can make other games. And there are viable games that you can make.
No, because I cannot sell on itch.io no matter what now. That is the issue. I can't come into compliance.
I don't know what to tell you
It's
there.
harsh. It's just harsh. And people should definitely understand what's happening so that they don't think that I'm just abandoning them. I mean, I feel bad about that too. It's just a really hard situation.
Yeah, it is. And I'm sorry that you have to go through this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All
Somebody
right.
just tries to rationalize it the whole time. I just need love.
I'm being called out
I
again.
just need sympathy.
It's okay. It's like how I get called out in the comments.
Yeah, he's taking over again.
Oh man.
Oh man.
And
No,
see, what you guys
not that
don't
bad.
hear is in the edits where she's like, "Oh yeah, talk about this now." Here, I don't want to talk about this. You talk about this now. And I'm just like, "Okay, I guess I'm going to talk about this now."
We did better this
And
time.
I
Though.
get to see behind the curtain.
You get to see behind the curtain. You're like when she's like, "Dance, monkey, dance," and I'm like, "Okay, I guess I'm dancing."
Oh
All
my
right.
god, you're so dramatic.
Oh yeah, because of you. All right, Annie. So, I don't know. I think we meandered a little. Was there anything
Yeah.
else you talked about? We never talked about Caligula. I know you want to talk about Nero and Caligula.
Coagulate.
Coagulate.
Like, what are you
Yes,
saying?
after he was stabbed, Caligula coagulated.
Oh god. Well, I did have stuff,
The Roman incest laws.
the Roman stuff and Greek mythology and Roman mythology, but I mean, we've steered too far from it now.
I just think it was funny that like Rome outlaws this stuff, and then the emperors were like making exceptions because they wanted to get with their sisters. It was
Yeah,
like,
it was-
Nice.
it's
yeah.
like, well, it's
Well, all I have to do is get powerful enough to change the rules. How hard is it to become president?
um,
Oh,
Can't be that tough, right?
It can't be that tough, honestly.
It depends on what you're the president of. The
Oh
Lockhart.
yeah,
I'm
no,
the
you could
president of the Lockhart fan club. Well, there you go. There are 3 of you. No, you've got Lockhart and his 2 sisters,
stop.
who are not
I should have
femboys.
never told you.
You really shouldn't have. Oh my god.
I can see it now. I'm a 37-year-old man with 2 femboy sisters, and my dad still wants to abort me.
Well, especially now.
Especially
Yeah.
now.
That's awful.
It's obvious so he can have the femboy sisters to himself. If I've learned anything
You know,
from
my-
these games, you can't have a son and a father. You have to have one or the other because the conflict.
Yeah, the conflict.
It's like Harry Potter. Neither can live while the other is there. You got to get rid of one of them. I do wonder, does it change the nature of the game when the character is a father versus when the character is a brother? Because you're still looking for the same, apex harem configuration.
Yeah.
Does it change the nature of the harem? Does it change how you get there? You've played a lot of these games.
I
Do you
guess,
notice
yeah.
a difference?
I get. I guess like if you do play as like the father figure, you do have more say in things.
Oh, the power imbalance. Again.
Yeah, but
What-
you also do have a power imbalance when you play as the son. To be
Well,
honest,
I
or
noticed
brother.
the son. It seems to be more sneaky.
That's true.
It's like
More manipulative.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, there's a lot of stealth mechanics
Yeah.
or drugging or everything
Oh,
else.
God, yeah.
Where with the father character is just like daddy's home.
Honestly, yeah.
And see, this is what power imbalance is, Lockhart.
I'm
It's you-
learning so much.
You're learning so much.
It's who has the bigger brain.
We're learning you.
Yes, a bigger brain.
All right.
Who can manipulate better.
I don't know if the bigger brain is the thing because Neanderthals had bigger brains than we did, and we won.
Yeah, they had smooth brains, though.
No, they did not have smooth brains.
Smoother than ours.
They were bigger than ours?
Yeah, their brains were bigger than ours.
Oh, interesting. Were
Just,
there
just a little bit bigger.
Oh, just a little bit.
Yeah, but we
Okay.
won.
Hey, size isn't everything, okay?
Yeah, if that was true, we wouldn't have insanely large male
Members?
parts in all of the
Genitalia?
game.
Yeah.
In
Yeah,
games.
dude, seriously, what's up with that? You're a developer.
The
What is-
breast.
Let's talk about
What
that.
is up with that? I know that's
It's just perspective. The camera takes away like
It's
10 pounds, so you have to add it
perspective.
back.
like
I don't know.
it's
I don't make proportions that are obnoxiously big.
Yeah.
I do
but you have
reasonable breasts.
you,
I have what?
You have petite female characters and you have ridiculous
There is nothing petite about Petal.
male
She has got a
appendages.
huge badonkadonk and double D's. She's a big girl.
She's still short.
And she
You
got
have-
that baby face.
You have
Yeah.
male genitals that could not possibly fit into your characters. And Daz just lets you make things as whatever size they want and does not take into account the internal organs of the characters.
To be honest, his main characters are not as big as some others. I've
like
seen
Treasure of Nadia.
Oh my god, yeah. Like it's huge.
Ridiculous.
It's honestly
Summertime
ridiculous.
Saga.
Yeah,
It's
summertime.
like-
Oh my god, summertime saga is so big.
Is the heart going to be able to pump enough blood to
It's
fill
like-
this thing?
It's like the size of a baguette.
Wait, shut up.
What?
Yeah, you can,
The size of a
he
baguette.
can
What is-
tickle his own nipple
Oh.
with his penis.
Yeah.
Oh
It's
my-
amazing.
Oh my god.
It's like a feat.
Yeah.
Like Guinness is calling him up like, wow, really?
Guinness World Records.
You mean the beer company?
Yeah.
The beer company? Is there a Guinness?
That's the same Guinness.
They have a beer company?
Guinness beer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not
it's
a
the same
beer
company.
person. So.
You know how the Michelin star
Yeah.
is the Michelin Tire Company? Or was?
No.
Yeah, that's how it started.
Tires?
Yeah.
Like car tires?
Yeah, car tires. They started.
Michelin.
They wanted to sell more tires, so they made a guide to get people driving more.
And that somehow coincides with
It
restaurants?
it became so popular because they'd recommend hotels and everything else, but the thing became so
Oh yeah.
popular with the restaurants, and it was a tire company.
Okay.
Guinness
Oh.
Yep.
sold beer,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the things that they determined was that bar trivia was this important thing. So Guinness
Oh.
started doing a trivia thing, which is the
Okay.
Guinness Book of World Records.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
the beer company.
I never made that connection.
Well, there you go. You
I didn't know. Yeah.
So now you can have a Guinness at your Michelin-starred restaurant. Probably not. I'm thinking about most Michelin-star restaurants are too snooty for her.
Yeah.
They're like, we're gonna give you some mixology Guinness alternative.
Yeah. We'll give you a leaf with with a piece of berry, not the whole berry. Like they cut it into quarters. And
I like Michelin-starred restaurants before they get their star.
yeah.
But afterwards,
Yeah.
it's like it
Because
becomes too expensive and too hard to go there. So.
Yeah.
All right. So you've got some alternatives this time. I like that. So for developers, what about consumers? How can a consumer looking to explore their sexuality in the face of Patreon and Steam and itch.io's sexual discrimination and discrimination by sexuality? In the face of that, what do you recommend to consumers? How can a consumer find the flavors they want to explore? One of the things that was brought up to you recently was that in a lot of your older games where you covered Patreon games, those links no longer work because Patreon's banned those games.
Yeah.
I don't think Patreon ever made it easy to find specific flavors. That's why I encourage developers to, if you have an itch.io page, put the flavors at the top. That's what people want to see first.
But if it's going to get them banned, and here's the
Are
problem.
you talking about the forbidden flavors?
Yeah.
I don't know if we should be encouraging people to explore that, because
game-
wouldn't we just get them in trouble?
If a game has incest in it, and you put that it has incest on it on itch.io, and that developer has a Patreon.
I would never.
Shut up. That's why you're on today. I don't want to hear this nonsense. I mean, what can a consumer do? I mean, is it just they got to search, they got to...
The keywords right now are guardian, ward, landlady, and roommate, right? So you look for those flavors, and that'll be what you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, some games have those designations. They do have patches. But otherwise, I mean, I feel like you could just use your imagination and be like, oh, this is an incest game. They say guardian and all those
Bodyguard.
others. Bodyguard, yeah.
So just like how people ship everything with their fan fiction, you're just shipping stuff with these games.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's what I did with Summertime Saga. I just used my imagination.
Use your imagination.
Because it's obvious that it's an incest
You're like,
game.
you use your imagination and you pretended it was a high school. Because
it wasn't hard to imagine. The fucking lockers. What college has that?
Yeah.
What college has that? Obviously, you haven't been to enough colleges in
Obviously,
in the Phineas and Ferb everlasting summer.
I did want to thank Lockhart for being on here. I will put the links for Lockhart's Patreon and Twitter. Is there any place else you want me to...
Itch.
Whatever's still
I do have the demos on itch.io.
Okay, well then I'll link to his itch as well.
Until it's banned.
Yeah, until it's banned. As soon as I post it, it gets banned.
Yeah.
People's going to listen to this a week from now. They're like,
Yeah, those
can't find this Lockhart stuff anywhere.
Yeah. Those links are going to be good for like 3 weeks.
Get some type of affiliate program up then.
Yeah. I'll also list out the games that we brought up today if you want to check those out. Be sure to check out my Patreon and my YouTube channel, Sex Positive Gaming, where I talk about sex and sexuality in video games. And thank you all so much for listening, and I will see you next time.